Following on from No More Heroes and its apparent success overseas, it was met with very lukewarm response in Japan. Suda and Grasshopper obviously began to direct and work on No More Heroes too, right? Well, sorta.
Hold it, you violence-loving bastards! Before you start your desperate struggling, you should drop a nice save.
Goichi Suda at this point would begin some weird absentee method of development. He fell into writing a lot for Grasshopper Games, or taking the mantle of executive director and producer sort of roles. Basically, he was making some moves overseas that didn't particularly pan out, would probably work on the concept stages of production, and then flitter between titles, or his name probably being used as advertising, as seen in Shadows of the Damned, where the project was directed by someone else entirely. But Suda wrote No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle, laid out the scenario, and then around this time was caught up with Lollipop Chainsaw, Shadows of the Damned, and presumably the business side of Grasshopper Manufacture. He was getting shit done and wouldn't direct a game himself until Travis Strikes Again and the upcoming No More Heroes 3, nearly a decade on from No More Heroes 2. With Suda out the picture, mostly, No More Heroes 2 takes a very different turn in how it deals with Travis and the world he inhabits. The humour from the first game is cranked all the way up to 11, the game itself refined to appease complaints from the first, and a bigger focus on giving the player more options while playing. At some point in the first No More Heroes, Travis discovers that his agent, Sylvia Christel, is nothing more than a con artist. She overheard him drunk in a bar talking about how everything was taken from him. Suppressed memories of his parents' murder by Jean, the fake final boss. And essentially creates this elaborate hoax funded by Travis's side jobs. It's a great ploy as a big smack to reality for the player, as well as Travis, that you can't just blindly trust everything that sounds too good to be true. Hell, most of the game he doesn't even realise he's in it for revenge, and eventually sheds that weight of revenge almost immediately, and in the fight no less. No More Heroes 2's lessons from this is actually just to say, fuck it.
You gotta be kidding! I haven't seen you in 3 years and that's the welcome I get? How about you fill us in on everything that's happened since the last game? We're not gonna be satisfied until you do, right?
Oh, give me a break. There are people starting from the sequel who don't care about continuity, you know. Besides, it would take forever if I recapped every detail of your fall from greatness. Players would skip it. It's so boring.
Well, I guess you got a point there.
Travis goes from schlub to legendary myth throughout Santa Destroy. It's a game that looks upon its predecessor at face value and face value alone. It completely misses the glaring subtleties and the major plot points, focusing on providing a far smoother play experience. The UAA now apparently exists.
So, this is the UAA office?
Surprised?
Didn't think it would be so fancy, considering the nature of your work.
Travis's porn and anime peddler and only friend, Bishop, has been murdered in an attempt to lure him out while he was distracted by a challenge from the brother of the first off-screen kill that kicks off the first game. All this is happening because Travis killed some pizza CEOs in the first game's side activities. The game has no real message, barely any commentary, and in actuality it is quite thin for a sequel. It's still a hell of a lot of fun, and I do enjoy a majority of the changes to the gameplay itself, but it lacks something. I think it perhaps lacks Suda?
Bastard! Help! Asshole! Bastard! Bitch!
No More Heroes, along with the other games Suda has developed, are so faithful to his vision that whenever it is taken from him, it begins to warp into something entirely different that doesn't look like it has that direct connection. There's no frank look at yourself here, just pure action and comical moments from Travis Touchdown. This said, and going back to the changes made, I actually do prefer them, but while No More Heroes 2 might be a better game to play, it is absolutely not a better experience. The open world? Gone. Hideous side jobs? Completely redone. Or in the case of side assassinations, they've been reduced to 10 one-off fights that lightly follow taking on the people that killed Bishop in the start of the game. Suda has even expressed regret of not expanding this out even more. There's a challenger that you can face off with, but as you'll see for the rest of the game, it's light on anything substantial other than that's neat. This is a narrower, straight down the middle sequel, only expanding on the bits that the general public would remember and opting to avoid a majority of the deeper meanings and understandings of society that Suda tried to implant. Travis now has access to multiple beam katanas that you can switch to on the fly. No More Heroes 1 required you to change these at the motel. His power-ups have been simplified to only focus on flipping about or killing faster and doing more damage. The first game featured you upgrading each katana and training Travis to increase life and strength. While the gym returns, it seems to have no real bearing on survivability in boss fights, nor does Naomi's weapon shop serve any purpose, as katanas are as they are for the rest of the game. While fighting goons is made way more engaging, the different varieties actually having some meaning rather than just reskins and different weapons. Desperate Struggles bosses might have been designed with the same flair, but they have very little impact as memorable moments.
No more heroes, it's hero the king. You can't tell nobody but yourself, nothing else to do. No more heroes, no time to stand still if you're gonna be number one.
Travis, it's kill or be killed.
This is mostly due to a major change in No More Heroes 2's design. See, in the first game, you'd notice that bosses either had invincibility frames, were defending, or were doing something new. Here, No More Heroes 2 has opted to avoid most of these. Instead of theatrics, you get into the action. Travis cuts through bosses constantly, with only a couple actually holding any real challenge on mild difficulty. There's barely any learning in these fights. I found that brute forcing my way through a majority of them saw a victory in the end. Let's use the real last boss, Henry, as an example compared to the final boss of No More Heroes 2, Jasper Bat Jr., the single hardest fight in the entirety of No More Heroes as a whole. Henry simply evolves as his health lowers, eventually bringing out a one-hit kill that you have to manage, but it's really slow, so it's not really that much of an issue. Jasper's first form does not convey any information that you need to head into a clash to activate a cutscene to continue. His second starts slow and eventually builds up speed that requires a zero-fault run or risk being locked into a cycle of being beaten up. His third is a big meat shield thing that requires you to enter a clash to deal enough damage to finish it off. It wasn't like Henry, who I'd personally put in one of the most difficult fights in the series as a whole as well, but Henry's fight was this elegant dance of learning him. This is the final challenge. Things, little things that you learn as you get your ass kicked over and over again, like he can't defend with his free hand, so dodge that way. And exploit the dark step that you will have learned over the course of the game. Because of this depth of detail, every single boss in No More Heroes 1 is far more memorable than the meaty punching bags or gimmicks that the others inhabit. In comparison, Jasper continually gave me a game over. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because it was simply far too much all at once. Here, it's simply just butt heads until you perhaps get lucky. It's a shame because fighting the waves of smaller enemies is a whole lot more fun in No More Heroes 2. You're not held up by Travis slamming against invincibility frames and things that don't affect it, but for bosses, it ultimately undercuts what could have been. For instance, there's a boss against a supernatural horror with a flamethrower. Not once does the game play into the supernatural aspect that has been built up, and the whole ordeal was over in about 30 seconds? A boss that was in a maximum security prison and is poisonous has a really cool look and an intro, except if you're clumsy, you'll find the unique things, but if you're smart, you'll, kill her in a couple minutes. What No More Heroes 2 does well is appreciate video games that No More Heroes, and more importantly, Grasshopper, owe its existence to. And this is a theme that carries on over into Travis Strikes Again as well. All the side missions and gym exercises have been completely replaced with 8-bit minigames. It's a nice change of pace, and I adore what they've done with the loading screens, which is someone blowing into a cartridge. However, because they lack any bearing on the game itself, you can just skip them all and go straight for the fights if you so choose. It's hard to actually comment on them outside of that. I also really enjoy how, for very brief moments, the game decides to experiment with the formula. This time, Travis has to go up 50 ranks. And fighting up 50 ranks is going to take way too long and too much for Grasshopper to feasibly produce. So, certain sequences you control returning characters that are ex-bosses like Shinobu and Henry. I wish we got more time with these characters though, as their playable sections are woefully short. Shinobu's fights against the money-obsessed Million Gunman, who has a money gun, are prefaced with a very basic hallway and horrific platforming. Henry's dream sequence alludes to deeper mechanics as well as Shinobu's sequences, but it's over before it begins. What it feels like is getting to play as the boss character in a fighting game. It feels wrong, like you're not supposed to have access to them, like you're cheating or hacked them into the game. I wish so much to explore Henry's lighter style and to maybe figure out the best way to deal with enemies as Shinobu that didn't involve spamming attacks until they exploded into clouds of blood. All the pieces are there, the story is well fleshed out and amps up the stupidity in a way that I personally enjoy, but in the end, it lacks the gooey feeling of the first game. If you knocked on the side of No More Heroes 2, it ring hollow. It looks great, it plays great, but for the most part, it really does not make good on the deeper understandings of the first game. But even if the thing rings hollow, it still has to have something inside, right? No More Heroes 2 it takes the low-flying bomb approach to criticism of the larger beast of the world that we deal with on a daily basis. Not once during the actual gameplay itself, nor in the story until the final couple hours with the player, does it rear this side of stuff, and it does so without the jagged edge that Suda brought to the table. Instead, it's more like a swift hammer to the face. With no time to breathe on this aspect throughout the game, it flops and it flops hard.
Sylvia!
You are now officially ranked second.
See that? Now that was a battle. Look at this blood. We humans are alive, even if we are assassins. Doesn't matter if it's a video game, movie, drama, anime, manga, we're alive! People shed blood and die. This isn't a game. You can't just selfishly use death as your tool. This is Alice's blood. I bet you've already forgotten she existed. Same way you would have forgotten me. And that's why I'm tearing down the UAA!
Are you done bitching? You could never shut down the association. Fighting to be the best is human nature. It's evolution. Who are we to try and stand in its way?
Fuck that. I want to be a hero by my own standards.
You need to wake up, Travis.
Take your own goddamn advice.
It's a message that could and should be discussed, especially through a character like Travis that walked away and is heralded as this savior because he did manage to get out. But it ultimately fails to capitalize on it properly by only introducing the concept at the very end of the story, and even then, barely. Now that might be a team issue, or it could be Suda's script, but considering what comes after No More Heroes 2, I have to believe that it's not the latter.